So let's start off with, we're talking about poetry. One of the things you said was read, don't write for a while. It's one habit that you've said you feel helps you write more. I was wondering, what have you been reading lately? And then the second question off of that, do you know how long you've gone without writing? Do you remember, or do you remember a time that you can tell us about?
I go through, I wish I was more consistent. I wish I was more kind of like, every day, 4 a.m., wake up, lemon juice or coffee, and kind of just bang out. A good friend of mine who's living here, he's Polish, and he does that every morning. He wakes up at 4 and he shows up, whether he writes one sentence or 20, he just does it, and I'm not like that. I kind of have these bursts where I write kind of like 7 things in one day, and then there's like 4 months where I just feel like I just don't do much, or I can't do much, or it's like, ugh. So I'm kind of a little bit more like that. I've learned to just embrace that a bit more, because I kind of like used to really castigate myself for the fact that that's like, why can't I just be, more like that? But I'm like, well, that's okay. That's how my kind of genius comes in and out, and that's okay.
Yeah. So, I think I have that pattern too. I think that's beautifully put. So when you use that word genius, are you referencing the old Greek figure? Yeah.
Yes.
Explain that really briefly for people who may not know, because that is such a useful tool.
It escapes me the exact story. Maybe you want to, but I mean, the way I used it now was rather, I think a better word, at least for what I really mean, is witness. I think that all great poetry, any literature, really is a opportunity to witness something as it is. And sometimes it's the opportunity to witness something as it might be, or as it could be. That's what great literature is. My first year English literature professor, the first thing he said, I'll never forget it. First year, he said, literature is imagining things other than they are. And that's beautiful, because even though that is about imagination and creativity and creating a world, it's also really witnessing things as they are in its own way. There's a sort of an attentiveness and an observation that I think any great poet, artist, an engineer, even a genius, and they are able to just see detail in a certain way, and it just makes sense to them. Albert Einstein looked at a board full of equations, and it just made sense. It just made sense. Notice it and observe it, and it was poetry to him. So I think that it's about witnessing and just seeing something as it is, and then celebrating that thing as it is, as opposed to creating and adding things. I think, if anything, that comes later, but that isn't the actual initial moment. Yeah, for me.
Yeah, because it feels like you're in the brief 5 questions that you answered, feels like you're very much like a field observer, if you will.
I try to be, yeah. And I think that's possibly why I have these sort of periods of sort of not writing or not being as productive. It's really because I'm needing to change, or kind of move over to another archetype or another faculty, which is just to be watching, and just to be looking, and just to be studying. And then later on, I kind of come back from my field notes and go, okay, now I've got something to say.
Yeah, that's why that was there. That's why this is there.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. The investigator archetype in the article of which archetype are you? Looks at, it's inspired our direction today. And that archetype can be recognized by the amount of information and the ways they consume. What kind of information? You were just saying you do a lot of observation, but what does that, if you could elaborate on what kind of information you feel you give most of your time to?
So I think this shows up in how I like to write, and in particular how I like to write poetry, because I like writing essays and kind of more standard prose as well. But almost all the time, I've kind of started to develop a bit more of a style where it's quite short, it's quite image-based, image over story, less of a story, less of a sort of a here's what happened and then we went there and all that, but more of a kind of there's a scene, and I'm putting you in the middle of that scene. You're in the middle of that room and something's going on, and now I want to paint that picture around you. And often there's sort of a physicality to it. There's a physical details. There's a smell in the room. There's a kind of a sound, there's maybe a distant humming. There's a highway where there's cars in the background, and all of that plays a role. It's like characters. And so I find that those details, calling them to life, is often the way I like to not just notice, because I do notice those things, but then bring them into the story I'm telling, the little bit of poetry that I'm writing, and then let that speak instead of trying to put a voice on top of that. I find that often the real thing that good poets learn not to do is to explain. Poetry is not a place to explain. It's not like, here's what that means, everybody, or like, here's what we should take away from this, and it's hard to resist because sometimes you want to put that in.
Yes.
And there's ways to add bits of that. But I think a lot of the time it's about, here's what I'm seeing in the world right now. Let it just be there. So yeah.
It's kind of like photography or painting.
Right. Same.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
I love it. Let's hear one of those poems. I'd love to hear Drop the Vase, if you can find that. Or do you pronounce it vase?
Very good. Yeah, vase. It's so funny, isn't it? Yeah, the different ways of pronouncing words. So this is a good example in a way. It's a short poem. It's 8 lines. And it's a good example of something that is kind of really not, it's more of an image than anything else. Because in 8 lines, how much really can you be saying? And so I kind of want to just focus on this kind of image. So it goes, drop the vase, break my hands. In the split window of the moment, I live between the breath and the beat. Drop the vase, break my hands. In the split window of the moment, I live between the breath and the beat. On the ground with glass feet. Everything always seems normal from just across the street. On the ground with glass feet, everything always seems normal from just across the street. And what's cool about that little piece is that it's like self-contained. It's like a little postcard. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure exactly what it means. If I had to sort of turn it into like a, here's what I meant, for me, it's just of kind of like something shatters in the world. Then literally with glass feet, because I dropped the vase, right? Oh my gosh, I've got glass all around and everything feels kind of like chaotic and fearful and difficult. And I can't even step forward because I might cut my foot. And then there's this sort of feeling of everything always seems normal from across the street, where maybe that's happening in other houses. Maybe that's happening through the window of other people's lives. But I can't see that because from here, it looks normal. And maybe from their vantage point, everything also looks normal. But we've all got our chaos in our own backyard. So yeah, that's just a short little piece about just an image and a feeling in that way.
Wonderful. Kind of like how Instagram is curated for us, but that's not really how necessarily things are. Yeah. Right. And as Mary Beth says, show, don't tell, using that old good tip for poetry.
Oldie but a goldie. Yeah. For any type of communication, really. Yeah.
And how interesting that is a vase rather than, a coffee mug or a plate. And it could work the same, but there's something about the vowel sound of it. And so much of that poem especially is the sounds.
Yes, totally.
You very much pay attention to in your work, which is really exciting to see.
Thank you. Yeah. It's because poetry is music, really, and even in free verse where there isn't as much of a rhythm or a meter, it's still supposed to sort of feel like there's a kind of someone's taking breaths between saying the words, drop the vase, break my hands. There's a kind of a meter to it. There's a drum beat. And a vase is this kind of old ornate, it's the kind of thing your grandmother probably had. I don't have any vases in my house.
Yeah, I was like looking around. I know.
Yeah, it's this kind of old school kind of thing, that's sitting there, maybe it's almost like an urn, or something kind of old fashioned, and now I've broken it. Now I can't go back, Yeah,
and meant to hold flowers, be decorative.
Mm.
I don't.
Mm.
And how many poems are about the floral world and all that? Well, here you can fill it with your own details if you wanted to as the reader. Same
Yeah.
with the split window. I mean, that
Mm.
window could be all sorts of windows. And yet, yeah. And I love how your reading of it was very nice. And every time I come to that poem, the language gives me more and more. You said
Mm.
elsewhere on Substack, I noticed that you like visual short stanzas and aren't a fan of the archaic words. Can you expand on that and your writing choices?
It's funny because I really enjoy reading like ancient kind of older stuff. Like I'm a big fan of William Blake and Shakespeare and the kind of stuff that is full of old, highfalutin, crazy kind of language. I like it. I enjoy that. I just don't write like that, but I like reading it. And I think that's often a misconception, to think that like what you like to read is what you like to write. I think it's often not the case. So I kind of like writing this sort of quite physical, quite like in the room, and you understand the words, often quite like straightforward words, not too many Latin or Greek sort of sounding words, because there's something physical and I can touch it about it. I think that's important, at least in the way that I like to hear it, because I like to read it out too. I want to hear poetry is meant to be performed, not just read, but
Thank
read out,
you. Yes.
yeah. So that's important. And having a kind of simple language, I think, helps to make you can move the rhythm a little bit more, rather than if you used a big word like surrender or I don't know. I don't know why I thought of surrender, but something that's big that has like an etymology and another language behind it. Split window, break my hands, breath, beat, glass, feet. Sort of quite everyday. I can feel them. I can touch them.
Mm-hmm. And it's so palpable. And yeah, it's the type of poem that, did you have that rehearsed? Like
No.
by memory? Okay.
I'm trying to do more of that. Yeah.
It seemed like you were so familiar with it. I love that.
I'm trying to do more of that. I love when people just recite poetry, just walking around or at a dinner table, like just say a few words. I find it so impressive. I find it so cool, to just say, or even song lyrics, that's cool. I didn't think about that, Yeah.
You just got bonus points. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess in many ways, the archetype of the investigator is someone who might have those reference points at hand, but also your ability to choose the simple words and the simple images also feels very much of the investigator, because they're going to pick apart.
Yeah, exactly. I think and a big part of what this poem is really, those last two lines, everything always seems normal from just across the street. In the split window of the moments, I live between the breath and the beat on the ground with glass feet. Everything always seems normal from just across the street. It kind of like has that perception versus reality, where on, driving by, with a nice picket fence and, the smell of grass being freshly cut, everything looks fine. Everything looks all right, from outside. It's all good here. But inside, there's turmoil. Inside, there's something else, and maybe you can't see my feet, but they're bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the investigator's job, and the poet in this particular case is to ask the question, wait for the response, and then based on what that response is, that might be the full picture. Now I've got to go deeper. Now I've got to go, but why is that like that? Is that true? What else around it? Be curious about the information I'm getting, because almost always it's not the full story. Everything always seems normal from across the street, and it's not. Yeah.
How telling, too, just occurred to me, the feet and the expression walk a mile in the other person's shoes or moccasins or what have you. Huh. Yeah. Now, do you feel your advice to poets is aligned with all this? In particular, I picked out you telling me, just write. You have to get through a lot of bad poetry, but just to get a lot of bad poetry first to get to anything decent you want to keep.
I think so. I think I'm probably still in my bad poetry phase, because
Aren't we all?
Yeah, totally. And it's okay, because it's I think the trick of doing that is not so that like suddenly one morning I can wake up and like, wow, I'm in my good poetry phase, but rather because you don't know what's inside until you just start. And so you've just got to write and write and write and write, and occasionally you'll stumble and you'll go, ooh, okay, I said something new there. One of my all-time favorite heroes in poetry, he's just an amazing guy for various reasons. His name is David White, and he talks about the good poetry is the act of overhearing yourself say something you didn't know that you knew.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, good poetry is overhearing yourself, you're always overhear someone else, overhearing yourself say something you didn't know that you already knew. And I love that, because sometimes you're writing and it's often when you're not thinking and you're deep into it, and then like, where did that image come from? I never thought about that. That's not connected to memory. At least it doesn't seem to be. And it's like, I pulled that out. And this one poem, the Glass Feet, was like that. That just like came out. I wrote that probably in like 2 minutes, and then moved it around a little bit. But it was just, And so I think you've got to do a whole lot of that, so that these moments of maybe things that you really do want to say, or that you can say but in a different way, comes out. Because a lot of the time it's accompanied by a whole lot of things that's maybe not as good or sounds cliched. So yeah, I think writing a lot, to really get it out is important. Not forcing it, I think, as well. And also not trying to fight that, once again, coming back to that thing of like not trying to fight the urge to explain, to tell a story, to sort of have something from start to finish. I've tried to really coach myself to like not resolve everything. It doesn't need a pretty ending. It doesn't need to have a kind of and then that happened, and then he was happy, and then the big check arrived and everyone was happy. No, let it stay jagged, let it stay kind of, whoa, why did it end like that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that answered my other two questions. Excellent. So one of the suggestions, a main suggestion in the article of which archetype are you, the Uranus in Gemini article, was to create list poems. And I've done a number of them. They can be inspired by a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Menu items, a list of to-dos, a list of to-don'ts, if you will. And so I would like to share one that is...
Yes, would you read one? Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of a collection about ancestors, sense of place, and more.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I have another one that I think ties in more with the other poem I want to hear from you. So this one's very short. 12 things that echo. 1, valleys. 2, remorse. 3, bats. 4, that mother in the myth. 5, canyons. 6, cartoon canyons. 7, that father in the fable. 8, caves. 9, pits in the heart. 10, empty souls. 11, the backs of jaws. 12, that parent alone in the very next room.
Whoa. When I read that, I was like, oh, this is cool. But just hearing you read it, and this is once again the beauty of hearing poetry, it's just comes alive. Each image is its own little universe, like as you go through it. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Backs of jaws. That's a cool one.
The backs of jaws. It's like, because there's that tension there, but also sometimes when you remember to loosen up. Yeah.
And so I want to ask you about that if I can. Because I'd love to, because I'm now, you got me curious, and I'm some of those images. Yeah, some of those images are still, especially the parent, and you kind of the mother, and then you kind of move away to something else, and then you return to the father, and then so there's a theme there, even though the structure is it's just a list. It's almost like a silly shopping list. But in between, we've got these huge images. Yeah, beautiful. It's like a recipe, but there it is. So what things that echo? How were you kind of observing? What was your observation? Because we're talking about the investigator. How were you observing? Because it's also very specific images, which is what I love about it.
This comes from a time when I lost both my parents, and they passed a couple years apart from each other. And I'd already written a lot of poems from way back in my thesis days, so like 12 years before that or something, where I looked at echolocation a lot. The caves and the bats appear in this poem, so I don't even recall if this was recycled from another poem, but I know it had gone through its fair share of revision. But yeah, echo definitely conveying the sense of openness, emptiness, and also like mirroring or repeating, and being a daughter and having the parents, kind of that echo phenomenon too.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. The parent in the next room, that's a real, a very haunting image. Amazing what you can do with just a few words, paint an entire picture. Yeah.
Just like you did, you know? And the use of what we've built. Like your poem was about things that we have built or broken, and then looked around us and saw what we still had and what we could see across the street. And the rooms and how people occupy space is a very interesting phenomena. Yeah. And again, that's something that a lot of people could relate to. So for them, it could be an echo of, oh yeah, I remember when not necessarily your own parent was alone, or someone you loved was alone in a hospital room, but like their parent's parent or something. That sense of helplessness. The
father in the fable. Yeah, lovely.
The alliteration came out later.
No, it's great. Yeah. And a little mythological kind of undertone there, which I'm always very partial to. Yeah.
Well, you get a lot of that from my stuff. And I thought this poem kind of ties in nicely. You were just saying something about, dealing with the brokenness, or I guess I was, but I feel like some of what's going on in this poem ties into The Guru Can't Wait Any Longer from your collections.
Yeah.
So if you would love to share that, we want to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So this one is called The Guru and the Gulls. So like seagulls. And also a shorter poem, 2 stanzas. And there's an element of comedy in it, but the comedy that can kind of be, as most comedy is, kind of deathly serious. Often the more serious the comedy is, the funnier it is as well. So there's such an interesting kind of piece in there. Yeah, so here it comes. The Guru can't wait any longer. He has a glitter gold sash and a plane to catch. He needs you to heal, so go ahead and feel and be done with it. Over the salt, dark sea, he left many hours ago, while you drift alone below. As seagulls feast with violence, all the real work is in the silence. Now be done with it. The Guru can't wait any longer. He has a glitter gold sash and a plane to catch. He needs you to heal, so go ahead and feel and be done with it. Over the salt, dark sea, he left many hours ago, while you drift alone below. As seagulls feast with violence, all the real work is in the silence. Now be done with it. So badass.
Use that word. Yeah. And I didn't realize the title. That's a very fun title, with the Guru and the Gull. So I'm imagining you wrote this before you moved to your recent location. So were you closer to the shore or anything?
No, I'm really close to the sea right now. I can see the sea where I am now, looking out at the Pacific. And this was something I wrote maybe a month ago, or it's quite a new one. And I just love the juxtaposition between people who present themselves as having the answer, knowing how to do the work, having done the work themselves, and kind of this kind of guru mentality, and that aura. Now, that's not to say that real gurus don't exist, because they do, but they don't present themselves. They don't need to. They don't need to announce. Just like when a billionaire walks in a room, often he's not needing to wear a suit. He's just got a kind of a hoodie on, right?
Yeah.
So, there's something there again about appearance versus reality, which I'm always interested in. And he's got the glitter gold sash. He's wearing the uniform, he's got a plane to catch. I'm really busy. I kind of need you to sort of, transform yourself quickly. He needs you to heal. So go ahead. Come on. Let's get on with it. Let's heal. He's done with it. I love you. Hare Hare Krishna. Now let's go. Next. And then later on, over the sea, now I'm kind of floating, and I'm like, well, I've done the work. I did the 12-step program. I did all the praying and all the plant medicine. I'm kind of adrift here in the sea. I can see your plane going past to your next great destination where you're going to give another electrifying keynote while I'm over here, while the fucking seagulls are eating my eyeballs out. So there's this kind of crazy, violent image. The seagulls are coming in, and that's the moment of transformation. The real work is not in the appearance of the work, but it's in actually feasting the violence and really going through everything that I'm here to go through, to feel the pain and to not have to say anything about it, not have to present anything. All the real work is in the silence. And once you've done that, now be done with it. Move on. Now you've done it. So now move on. Don't get stuck in the healing loop. Move on. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that gives us a good sense, too, of the themes that have been popping up, at least in those 2 poems that you shared.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
exactly. And how something as sort of serious and kind of portentous, or another word, like kind of like sort of serious and kind of like we're here to heal and the inner child and all that, can kind of have a comedic, it's like ridiculous because it's not real a lot of the time. And then something that's kind of funny with seagulls, what the hell am I doing floating here while they're eating my eyeballs? That taking the serious tone as well. So just to juxtapose that, just to have fun with that.
Yeah, I like this motion for that. The seagulls are so obnoxious too. I have not experienced them often. I grew up in landlocked Colorado, so
right. Okay. Yeah.
But
yeah, well, where I'm from in Cape Town in South Africa, they just shit on everything. They just leave their mark all over the place, near to where I grew up near the sea. They're always around. They're always there. They're so hungry all the time, and they're really kind of quite like, brazen and even sometimes aggressive. This is terrible, terrible creatures. But even so, they're teaching us something, So yeah.
Everything is a gift, right?
Yeah.
And giving us these images. Yeah, the natural world is fascinating that way. And it's funny, I saw another creator here asking, would you like I think it was like, would you like something that talks about what editors really don't want from poetry? And a comment was, if it's just as mundane as we don't want any more bird poems, I don't think that's useful because you could miss a really good bird poem.
True.
And it's just like, it's like, oh, interesting. Birds pop up and everything, right?
Yeah, that's also, I suppose, it's a good mention, because I think the job of an investigator, poet, storyteller, someone who is observant, is not going to always rely on the standard description for things. So if we look at the bird is traditionally seen as the kind of I suppose, the archetype or the symbol for freedom, for spreading your wings, for being able to go long distances, to be able to have kind of this sense of liberty and kind of like exploring new places and to be free and all of that stuff. And that's all true, but that's a road that everyone's gone down. 2 roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled. Where can we just approach something differently? How can a seagull be the image of, not in this case like a bird, freedom or beauty, but perhaps the worst type of violence and the kind of thing that perhaps seagulls are capable of, but we've just not given that much attention to it. So that's often new combinations of the same images, but said in different ways or a different angle, is really the job, I think, of the poet, the investigator poet.
You're so fun to interview. you give so much. You have such great answers. I was thinking, let's see, I think it's still on the little bullet point right here. Did I forget? Oh, we did forget how the image of the gold sash is significant. You kind of addressed that. I guess maybe how did that occur in your brain as something that you wanted to include? Do you recall that as you wrote it?
I mean, I was kind of like thinking about some of these gurus in particular, some because guru is a sort of a term that applies often to these spiritual masters that come out of India or Southeast Asia in some way. And the more kind of decorated they are on the outside, perhaps there's a compensation being made for a lack of the spiritual journey that hasn't been taken on the inside. That's an assumption, that's an image. And obviously I'm not talking about any one guru. I'm talking about this guru, because he can't wait any longer. He's got a glitter gold sash and he's got a plane to catch. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of ridiculous, because he's here and he's kind of like bestowing, peace and all the ways to heal yourself and everything else. But there's something about the glitter in the gold, which is kind of like I'm getting mesmerized by just being in front of him and this beautiful aura, but there's actually nothing else behind it, because all he's thinking about is the fact that I've got to get out of here in 10 minutes. I need you to heal. So go ahead and feel and be done with it. So there's something funny and there's something really tragic about the fact that there's an intention that isn't true there. And it's not just about the guru, but a lot of the time in the way that people, I think, approach trying to heal themselves, which is a noble pursuit. But sometimes we get lost in the addiction of trying to fix things rather than really learning to try and just integrate them into real life. I've done lots of plant medicine journeys, for example, and I find that the same people often show up to the circle, and that's because they've convinced themselves this, I got to go back, I've got to fix that, I've got to do something. I don't know, but I've got to do more work there. That may be true, but the work isn't done here. It's done out there. It's done out in the real world. It's done while you're floating in the sea and while seagulls are attacking you. Then you've got to do the work. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought us back to the plant medicine. So I remember you mentioned the 12-step program, the prayer, the plant medicine, which in itself is a great line to work with in a poem.
Yeah.
All those tools for healing. And it kind of leans into, I wanted to share a second poem of my own from that collection that gives, again, it's a list poem. So kind of the suggestion for the investigator. Practica. They say a proper toolkit contains sea salt, olive oil, strong alcohol. They recommend supplies in home goods. How ironic, right? Glass jars, stainless steel pot with lid, strainer, heat-proof measuring bowls and cups, spoon, knife, string, and other items fulfilled at the greater and lesser grocers. Gauze, cheesecloth, parchment paper, baking sheet. They say always keep an assortment of plain white candles on hand. Animal bones, claws, feathers, and teeth, and colored inks and papers can also be useful. Black and white cloth can be cut from old t-shirts. Whether you have one or not, it doesn't matter where you put the red candle.
Talk to me about the significance of that red candle. Why is it red?
I knew that would come up because in a lot of craft work or witchcraft, the choice of the color of the candle is supposed to be significant. However, you can use white for anything. And I was making some friendships. I've been in New Jersey for maybe 5 years, and I was making new friendships out here. And one of the ladies said, "It doesn't matter where you put the red candle." And I thought that was such a great line. I wanted to use it, of this acceptance, much like the guru. He was on the opposite end in your poem where he's like, be done with it. I got stuff to do. In a lot of paganism, the idea is, hey, we can choose what we need to do for ourselves to empower ourselves, use a lot of tradition, sure. But at the end of the day, we've got to be resourceful. We always have been. So we don't have to be too strict with ourselves. Yeah.
So true. Yeah. Those limits we put on ourselves that don't actually exist outside, but this is the way. That's what I got to do. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
It's no vase.
There's no vase. There's no vase.
There's no vase in here. I got to write a poem about that.
There's the vase. Yeah, put the candle in the vase. Yeah, make it look pretty. Yeah, yeah.
You must have a vase.
You gotta have a vase in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and preferably feet that are healed, or that's
Yes.
that's the reason for these tools.
Yeah. Something that I often find is useful to do as an exercise, because is to sort of write in a kind of in a verse, in more of a kind of a rhythm and a rhyme that's more sort of like a da 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 da, what they call iambic pentameter and all that. And that's not because that comes naturally to me. I prefer just putting something out, but it's a great exercise because it forces you to really just pay attention to the rhythm and listening to the what the rhythm exposes itself to you, not just the content of the words, but how these things can kind of just speak differently especially when you read it out, and how what a useful way that can or what a useful exercise that can be, because I'm always looking for little exercises, not just to write but to sharpen how I write as well.
Yes.
And that's a good example.
Yeah, you got me thinking. I want to now I'm I want to feature more books. Let's do that. Thanks. And what's beautiful about that exercise is I find it's easier when you hear or are reading a lot of examples.
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
Then you fall into it.
That's why, and you can really get quite kind of just completely taken away by it, magically. I mean, there's a short couplet from William Blake, if I can recite that very quickly.
Make it up.
I'll make it up.
Yeah. Break it down for us.
Break it down, yeah. And it's in the middle of a long poem of his, which is just beautiful. William Blake, an amazing, interesting guy that lived 250 years ago. And he talks about once again, the duality of joy and woe, happiness and sadness. And he says, joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with a silken twine. It is right, it should be so. We were made for joy and woe, and when this we rightly know, through the world we safely go. And there's something beautiful about the kind of the meter, the rhyme there, because it sounds like child's play. It sounds like a beautiful lullaby. It sounds like it's so innocent, but it's talking about the deepest, most profound forces in the universe, and finding a way to connect them beautifully. A clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with a silken twine. They're part of the same thing. They're connected. And finding a beautiful image and a beautiful way to hear that image as well.
Right, right. Thank you very much for that. I'll be sticking with me. And that's easy to find too. Wonderful. Your family is one of the other parts of yourself that make your writing better. Do you feel they also have some of the investigator archetype? Do you see that with them?
You mean in what I notice or observe within my family?
Yeah, maybe how they create, how they communicate, or are they more complementary to you?
Wow. I mean, both. I'm also a father. I have 3 kids. I have 3 young kids, 10, 6, and 2. And they are nothing but an infinite supply of constant wonder and frustration and bemusement and confusion and all of these things that just go into the role of being a parent. So that comes anywhere, whether or not you're observing it or paying attention. That's happening, and so it really is a constant invitation to lean in and not be distracted and not be doing stuff, but to look up and to give my 2-year-old or my 6-year-old or my 10-year-old a bit of attention and to just see the world from their vantage, from their perspective, and how things are still making sense in their young brains, and to realize wow, you just still are a kid, and that things are that or the way they might say something, or the first time they tell you that they love you, it's just, wow, it fills your heart with joy, but also how they say it and how they do it and when they do it and when they make you proud. And to be attentive to that is to find volumes and volumes of poetry, really, because it's real life, and it happens there. And I think that it takes us back to our own inner child that we're always really still living with and learning to parent ourselves through still.
Yeah.
And this is a whole other thing that I explore a lot of as well in the work that I do with men a lot of the time, is to really just reconnect with who that is and who you're parenting yourself through. It's still as that 6-year-old boy or girl. And when you're with the child and when you're there and with your family, then you're going to have all of those moments that are going to be reflected back to you, that are going to be reflected back when you were 6, when you were 2, when you were 10, and what you thought and what was normal for you. So yeah, there's so much I can say about that, but it's yeah, there's so much there.
Essays. Yeah. And you seem very sociable, but you went with the investigator archetype as opposed to the one that was more social or the one that was more bookish. Do you feel when you co-parent, do you feel you use investigator, book clubber, or the social cafecito club?
I'm probably more on the social side. I think that's my nature. I'm an only child, and I spend a lot of time with myself, and so I think I've learned how to be social with myself. I know that sounds weird, but that's actually true. And so I think when I am around people, if I'm in conversation, I like to show up. I like to contribute. I like to be part of it. So yeah, that's definitely there. I feel that this is recently in another piece that I'm going to publish on Substack soon as well. Is I've been focusing a lot of time on thinking about how I answer the question, "How are you?" or "What do you do?"
Good. That's a good topic.
I have found that question so hard to answer for my whole life, because firstly, how much time you got, and because I don't like leaving it at like, "I'm great, how are you?" I'm fine. But also in being asked often with new people in social situations, what do you do? You've got to kind of come up with this great 20-second elevator pitch, which has got just the right amount of humor, just the right amount of relatable topics, just the right amount of, mysteriousness or whatever it is, and make it sound cool. I've always found a pressure on that. Whereas and so because I try and aim for that in some way, I always fumble that answer. Or I tweak it in a way where like, nah, it's not, I don't really like the way I said that. And that bothers me. And so.
Or does that represent me? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like that I'm lying. It's just that it just comes out in a way that doesn't feel really kind of aligned with who I am and what I really want to say. And so I've spent some time trying to experiment on different ways to deliver that story, where I'll maybe take a breath, I'll stop, I'll not go jump straight into trying to impress you mode, but rather, how am I doing? What am I doing right now? What's got my attention? And maybe that'll just be a different answer on every day, and maybe that'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what do we want to tell different types of people in different circles as well?
Yeah. Totally. Because you're broadcasting to an audience in a way. You're speaking to people, and they've got to understand, and and they're invited to also tell you what they do, and so you're setting the scene. And it's an interesting place.
And it's so telling when you're in a different group how they respond. And I don't think I experienced that much when I was in the last place I lived, which was a really nice college town in Kentucky. And coming from Colorado, which I don't know if you're familiar much with Colorado, but it's not entirely a progressive state in the United States, but where I was, typically around the universities, that tends to be the thing of like, okay, we're free thinking, we accept people, and a lot of us are artistic. Well, again, when you're around the university culture, and also there were so many art galleries, that was the thing again. So it's like a lot of people are like, "You're going to Kentucky? What?" And I'll mention it around my colleagues at work. I'm a substitute teacher in Princeton, and they're like, "Oh, neat," and they'll want to ask follow-up questions sometimes, or they'll just be like, "Oh, neat." I wore a cool shirt that says, "If you love clean air, plant trees, please. And it has
Yeah.
this neat design that's like a tree that looks like lungs. And I wore that to my garden club locally.
Mm-hmm.
Very different mindset. They're like,
Right.
"Oh, I like that." And I said, "Yes, my friend designed it out in Kentucky." And they kind of like went,
Oh, really? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if it
And
was me projecting that or what.
I mean, it's at every stage we're making impressions with people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the kind of thing that some people don't care. Some people care too much. I think in many ways, we're just not always attentive. Once again, coming back to the investigator, we're not always maybe attentive to the different cues, the nonverbal language, what we're wearing, how we're saying something, and how that creates an impression. Not that it matters so much that we should care about what that is in every single person, because ultimately that's their story they're creating about us. But it's an interesting dance. It's a social dance, Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for dancing with us, for sharing one of your next articles, ideas that's going to come out. Is that how you answer? Is that piece on how you answer those questions going to be your next, or are you working on something else?
I've already worked on that. That's scheduled. That'll come out in a week or two. That's called "How to Answer How Are You."
That's perfect.
Yeah, and then I'm working on a few other pieces right now. Some poetry. I'm busy writing a sort of a 5-part series on some of the work that I do with my men's group. That's called The Gentle Fire, and that's all about tending to the fire inside. Because if we don't tend to it, it either burns out and becomes a desert, or it extinguishes everything we know and love. And so we've got to pay attention to the fire, keep it burning, so that we can be of service to others. And I'm busy exploring that at the moment. So enjoying where all this is taking me, and it's taking me to conversations with people like you. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for showing up too.
Yeah, you've put out some good stuff that's been resonating with people, and I'm so happy for all your successes and wishing you more. Very good.
Thank you. Same to you. Let's do this again.
Sounds good. All right, and my next piece will be out in about a week, and funnily enough, it is involving the inner child.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's a blue moon. So it is a poem that was inspired by another creator here on Substack, and then just looking at goal guidance for creatives is something I'm leaning into a bit, and hoping that with each long form post, there's maybe an idea that someone feels like, okay, now I feel like I can trust myself to plan a simple goal and maybe give myself permission to do something. So I'm glad that I reached out to you and we were able to put together a small goal like this. And thank you so much for sharing your poems.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for holding the space. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Yep. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.